How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Model Behavior by Box, where we test the latest AI models on the kinds of files people actually work with every day. Today, we're going to check out Claude Fable 5, which is Anthropic's newest widely available model. Now, Fable 5 is built for demanding reasoning, long context work, and complex knowledge tasks. So my goal today is to put in front of you a few realistic enterprise workflows, basically the kinds where important details are spread across tables, exhibits, commentary, and fine print. We'll test it out on two in particular, the first being a contract review workflow, and the second being an earnings review. Now, in both cases, what I'm looking for is whether it can actually connect the dots, catch inconsistencies, and also surface what a human reviewer should pay attention to. Let's check it out. All right, first up is this fictional vendor agreement between Data Pipeline and Meridian Financial Group. At a glance, it looks pretty standard, to be honest. It's just a pretty typical enterprise contract. You got the main agreement here, services, fees, IP, liability, security, those kind of things. And then towards the bottom on the very last page, you also have an Exhibit A with a statement of work. And that's actually usually where things get a little tricky. In certain contracts, the exhibit might actually include something important that never really shows up in the main agreement. Or the exhibit might actually say something that might conflict with the core terms. So in this case, we're not really looking for a summary here. What we really want is a model to compare the pieces against each other. So we'll check it out in Box AI. Read this contract and all attached exhibits. Identify any obligations in the exhibits that are not referenced in the main agreement body, and flag any conflicting terms between the two. All right, we have our answer. Looks like Fable 5 splits the answer into two clear categories: exhibit-only obligations and direct conflicts. It finds the dedicated engineering resources for the first 90 days, as well as the support response times: P1 in 1 hour, P2 in 4 hours, P3 in 24 hours. And all of these appear in only Exhibit A, not the main agreement. Then over here, it also flags one big conflict. Clause 3.1 says 99.5% uptime for all production services, while Exhibit A says 99.9% for the real-time analytics API. I also like the caveat at the end. It notices that the full Exhibit A is referenced but not included here, and that Exhibit B is also referenced but missing. So the response is useful, but it also tells us where the source material is actually incomplete. Pretty cool stuff. All right, for the second example, we're gonna switch from legal to finance. This one's an internal Q2 earnings review for a fictional company called Novatech, and has the usual mix of executive summaries, management commentary, revenue tables, expense data, guidance, and also at the very end, capital allocation notes. All right, so my question here is, does this narrative actually match the numbers? Because in some documents, the issue isn't just because something's wrong or maybe something's inaccurate. Sometimes the issue is that the narrative might emphasize the good news and might sort of de-emphasize or soften the harder parts. Let's check it out. We'll paste in this prompt. Compare the CEO letter narrative to the actual financial results in the tables. Note any areas where the narrative appears to downplay or contradict the data. Great. We have a strong answer because it does two things at once. First, Fable 5 confirms where the CEO narrative is actually supported. Cloud and SaaS grew 24% year over year, came in above guidance, and also represents 44% of revenue. It also confirms that the review guidance raise is supported by the top line results. Now, later on, it actually gets into some of the gaps. So the biggest one is the margin story. It looks like the narrative frames the margin pressure as deliberate R&D investment. And that's partly true, but Fable 5 points out that the EMEA restructuring charge also drove a meaningful part of the margin drag. And it looks like that very detail is missing from the narrative. It also flags hardware, where management calls the decline intentional, but hardware and devices came in 8% below guidance, which actually suggests that the decline may have been worse than planned. And it also catches a couple quieter issues too, like enterprise software missing guidance, gross margin declined 180 basis points. And the 2027 margin expansion story may have been a headwind from tech stack integration costs. So my takeaway is that the useful thing here is the balance. It shows where the narrative actually holds up and where the numbers might tell a more complicated story. All right, so my takeaway from these two examples is that Fable 5 is especially useful for more judgment-heavy knowledge work. So you're seeing things like comparing a contract to exhibits, finding obligations that might appear in one place, and also checking whether a narrative actually lines up with financial tables, with the numbers. It's really the kind of work that's not uncommon across legal, procurement, finance, investor relations, and operations teams. And with Box AI, the cool part is that Fable 5 is already working on the content you store in Box. So your enterprise docs, contracts, earnings reviews, tables, exhibits, and all supporting files. And that's it. That's it for Model Behavior by Box. We're going to keep testing the latest models on real enterprise workflows, and I'll see you next time.